Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk a bit about Hedera-Hashgraph, whether or not its price is starting to deviate from its fundamentals, and then also what some of our models think about where HBAR might be going next. So what I want to talk about first is we just look at the HBAR chart, which I'm showing you right here. We had this really nice run up from December of 22 up into February of 23. But then we've been largely just in a downtrend ever since. Now, obviously, HBAR is not alone in this. Pretty much all altcoins have been trending down ever since this kind of rally that we saw in the beginning of the year. But one of the things I've seen with HBAR relating to Hedera-Hashgraph is people saying, there's a lot of confusion. People saying, why is it that HBAR's price is continuing to trend down when factors linked to its fundamentals look better than ever? We look over here at the number of transactions that Hedera is transacting per second and how many it's done on the mainnet over time. This is fantastic, right? You look at this, you say 9 billion transactions. Currently it's around 700 GPS. This is up at around 1,000. There it is, just back up over 1,000. And even the test net now is really high, suggesting that there might be some other use cases that are currently giving a test to their services, which might then at some point go on to the mainnet. You just imagine if you're basically over doubling the number of transactions per second happening on the mainnet, how quickly that will balloon the number of total transactions. And with the idea that Hedera is trying to position itself as a enterprise blockchain, something where real use cases get deployed on it using millions of transactions, and then even though each transaction is very cheap on a dollar term, you have enough of them that should basically translate into a lot of revenue generated by the Hashgraph protocol, which then should allow it to be profitable and continue into the future and grow and gain even more adoption going forward. At least that's the kind of fundamental idea. So if we're thinking, is this a good sign for Hedera that it's doing this on the mainnet, having this many transactions per second? Absolutely. I've talked before about HBAR, how with the thesis of it ever realizing that promise that I think a lot of people see in it, we need to be looking for those milestones, those things telling us that it's actually on the right path, because promise means nothing unless it's executed. And certainly this is a great step in the right direction. We're starting to see this. This is a good sign. But again, then why the heck has it not translated into price action? Why is HBAR doing so poorly here instead of going, trending up, which I think a lot of people say that it, or think that it should be doing based on these fundamental developments? Well, the simple reality in crypto is that price does not always follow fundamentals, or at least on any shorter term time frame. For me personally, when I think about fundamentals of a crypto project, it's not about what those fundamentals mean for the price action in the next month, even in the next year, even in the next 2 years. For me, fundamentals more point to whether or not this thing will even exist several years in the future. Will this even make it to the next bull market? And there's plenty of altcoins that are out there that are basically vaporware, getting no adoption, no real usage, that will slowly bleed out over time. And so for me personally, when I'm evaluating something in terms of whether or not it's a reasonable long-term hold, then I'll be looking at the fundamentals to say, first off, can I even trust that this thing has a decent chance of making it into the next bull market? And if it does, if it has decent fundamental properties going on, then that is kind of the first thing it has to pass for me making those considerations. But then when I'm deciding, is it a good time to be acquiring the asset, that's a very different calculation. Because you can have great fundamentals, but still be at a point where things are not looking so great in terms of accumulation, because price might be likely to start moving down. So that's where I personally rely on models that we have that can give us a better indication of that idea of when is it a reasonable time to be acquiring the asset, that is separate from this question of whether or not the asset will continue to exist in the future, which is largely informed or often informed by things like its fundamentals. So obviously, none of this is financial advice. You should make your own opinions about how to think about these things, how to navigate it. But based on what I was just talking about, then the next thing I want to do here is talk about some of those models that I'm looking at and what they think about HBAR and where it might be going next. So the first thing I want to show here is our forecast model that I've built recently. It's one that we're hoping to deploy here soon. So this model, what it does is it evaluates the asset and it creates a probability, a probability estimate of how likely it is that the price of that asset will be higher than it is today 6 months in the future. So how likely is it that HBAR's price will be above where it is right now today 6 months in the future? And so the green line here is HBAR's price across time. The blue line is the model's output, these estimates of probability of upside across time. And what you can see is that it does a really great job of capturing these dynamics. So in this period for HBAR here, these really fantastic times to be acquiring it, notice how bullish the model is this entire time here. You know, it's up well over 90, up at around 95% confident of upside in 6 months at these points. And then indeed, that ended up shooting off to the upside. It ended up being that absolutely right, had this massive bull run. Then importantly, as we went into the all-time high for HBAR through here, through late 21, look at what was happening with its estimates. It was getting progressively bearish. And in fact, by the time we set in our all-time high for HBAR back here, it was already below 50% probability of upside in 6 months. It was giving very clear warning signs at this point that things were not as bullish as a lot of people were claiming. I remember at this point, a lot of people were saying that $1 HBAR is imminent, it's coming, that $5 HBAR is coming, that $10 HBAR is coming. And in fact, we got very much not that. We got very much the opposite. HBAR collapsed in price after that. This model saw it coming. And you can see that all the way through here, we got down to under 10% probability of upside through this point, and then down we went. But importantly, when we look at more recent history, what we can see is the model has been getting more bullish, and especially then with this run here, it's now been growing. So even as HBAR's price has been pulling back since this point here, you'll notice that the estimate has been getting even progressively higher. And now it's just under 90% chance of upside in 6 months from the model's perspective. So 90% is not 100%, obviously, but you'd much rather be here if you're a bull on HBAR than here. Here is pretty bleak, not very high chance that things are going to be looking bullish in the next 6 months. Here, things might be looking quite a bit different. And this is the reason why I really like this model, because I think what a lot of people want to do in the crypto space is look at the market and say, what probability is there that the market will be up or down some point in the future? In this case, 6 months. And the idea is that you've heard the people talk about this before, probably, this idea of thinking probabilistically about investments, that it's never a black and white issue, it's always a likelihood debate. And the idea is trying to play the market where the probabilities are in your favor. So you're investing at times where the probability of upside outweighs the probability of downside, and you're distributing when the probability of downside outweighs the probability of upside. And that's exact kind of thinking that this kind of model allows or facilitates or helps one engage in. So instead of having to do some subjective evaluation of the market just based on what you think, which is often going to be wrong, remember how many people here were saying that the market was only going to go up and how wrong they were. People oftentimes on their own will get that very wrong. The benefit of a model like this is it's objective. It doesn't care about what we think. It doesn't care about how much we like or dislike a project. It's just evaluating the data objectively and giving its estimate. So that's what I really like about this. And so its position right now is that a bullish outlook on HBAR makes sense. So again, not financial advice, just make your own decisions, make of this data as you will. But I wanted to show it because I think that this is just really useful information, a very useful model to help us think about where we are in the market and for a particular asset, in this case, HBAR. Okay, now I want to talk about one more model here before I wrap up, and that's our long-term risk model for HBAR. So this is our upside downside potential indicator if you haven't seen it before. Higher values mean higher risk, lower values mean lower risk, and it ranges from -5 being kind of the lowest risk reading, or really what that means is that the probability of downside is quite low, probability or plausibility of upside is quite high, and then vice versa. If you're really high on that level, if you're up closer to 5, that's when the upside potential is quite low, downside potential is quite high. And what you'll notice here is that we kind of into this run up here, the long-term UDPI really aggressively moved up to above kind of neutral But now we've really started to cool off again, really getting back down to levels that we haven't seen. Well, we've seen it back through here, but if we compare it to the last bull market, we really saw last time here, or all the way at the kind of all-time bottoms back here in January of 2020. And so this is giving a similar kind of outlook to what we're seeing with the forecast model. This is also saying that right now, think about the risk-reward terms. What is the plausible upside versus the plausible downside? Upside versus downside potential. It thinks that the upside potential for HBAR long-term, so months to years from now, is looking quite favorable. Now, it's not all the way at the bottom currently. There's more room that could fall and price could bleed out more. But again, overall, it's signaling that this general time might be in hindsight, when we're years in the future, we very well might look back at this time and say, man, what a great time to be acquiring HBAR. And that's the kind of thing that this is indicating, that just kind of like back in here, it's seeing the same kind of things. Now, again, obvious caveats need to be said that if the stock market falls off a cliff, if a major recession hits, then all bets are off. Who knows what would happen in those kind of situations. But if history is any guide, if past trends are any guide to future trends, right now looks quite favorable from a risk-reward perspective from this model's perspective. So one more time, not financial advice, you make your own opinions. That's what this model is seeing. So to wrap up then, what I really wanted to kind of talk about in this video is how even though HBAR's price is declining, that's something that isn't necessarily surprising given bullish or favorable fundamental developments. Those can happen while price doesn't do anything that impressive. That's normal. That's frankly expected in the crypto market. That fundamentals are far from being perfectly correlated with price. But when we look at models that are able to tell us objectively about acquisition points, about when is risk favorable on the asset itself, in this case HBAR, then they're currently looking quite bullish. So again, those obvious caveats still apply, but the data are telling us right now a more bullish picture than a more bearish picture. Doesn't mean that that'll continue forever, but right now that is the case. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates about indicators and more over there. And make sure to check out polaritydigital.io. That's the website that we've launched in collaboration with Jay over Daily Crypto Analysis. That's where I am right here on this page looking at HBAR's risk. You can look at all of our indicators for HBAR and more over there.